For 7 seasons, young Sheldon sold itself as a warm little family comedy. Laugh track, Bible jokes, a genius kid in a bow tie. But if you go back and actually watch it, really watch it, you'll notice something. This was never a comedy about a happy family. It was a slow-motion tragedy. And everyone watching knew exactly how it ended before the first episode even aired. The dad dies. We were told that on The Big Bang Theory years earlier. So every single laugh in young Sheldon was sitting on top of a countdown clock. Today, we're walking through every tragedy the Cooper family went through, and how the show hid a genuine gut punch behind a sitcom smile the entire time. Stick around, because the last one is the kind of moment you don't forget. Let's start with the thing the show almost never says out loud. The Coopers were broke. Not cartoon sitcom broke. Real broke. George Sr. wasn't just a high school football coach. He was a man working 2 jobs to keep the lights on, coaching during the season and picking up work at Dale's sporting goods store on the side, terrified that if he lost the coaching gig, the whole thing collapsed. This is a family in 1980s East Texas with 3 kids, one of whom needs college-level science equipment, living in a house where every repair is a crisis and every new expense is a quiet panic. And here's where it gets darker. The family's financial lifeline for a stretch wasn't a paycheck. It was a gambling operation. Meemaw, sweet pie baking. Meemaw opened a literal backroom gambling den to make money. That's how thin the margins were. The grandmother running an illegal casino is presented as a fun subplot. And then, just when things start stabilizing, the universe takes another swing. In the final season, a tornado tears through and destroys Meemaw's house. Georgie, Mandy, and their newborn baby are suddenly crammed into Sheldon's tiny bedroom because they've got nowhere else to go. That's the baseline for this family. Not, will they be happy? Just, will they make it through the month? Now, if you only remember one thing about Mary Cooper, it's probably that she's the religious one. Church every Sunday, grace before dinner. Faith is her entire identity, which is exactly what makes this next one hurt. A young girl in the neighborhood, a child, dies in a car accident. And Mary, who has built her whole life on the idea that everything happens for a reason, suddenly can't find the reason. She looks at a dead kid, and she cannot make the math work. How is this part of God's plan? She tries to outrun it. She volunteers harder. She starts a Bible study group. She builds a faith garden. She is physically forcing herself to keep believing. It doesn't work. She stops going to church. She stops saying grace. She goes out drinking with Meemaw and comes home drunk. And George, overwhelmed, has to tuck the kids in and make breakfast the next morning because their mother has quietly fallen apart. And here's the detail that breaks me. The person who pulls her back isn't the church. It's Sheldon, the kid who doesn't believe in God at all. He tells his deeply religious mother that even he's open to the possibility there might be a creator. Not because he means it, but because he loves her and he can't stand to watch her drown. The atheist comforting the believer. That's the show in one scene. But here's where it gets even more uncomfortable, and most fans miss this. The faith that Mary spent years serving. It turns on her. Once the family's secrets start coming out, the gambling, Georgie's situation, all of it, the congregation she devoted herself to starts treating her like a problem, a pariah. After years of service, they single her out. And if you've seen The Big Bang Theory, you know this is the cruel irony. Adult Mary becomes more rigidly religious, more judgmental. And young Sheldon quietly shows you a woman who kept clinging to an institution that repeatedly let her down in her worst moments. Her faith wasn't comfort. By the end, it reads almost like a wound she refused to stop pressing. That's 3 tragedies stacked on one character. And we haven't even gotten to the kids yet. Let's talk about the most overlooked Cooper of all, which is fitting. Because being overlooked is literally her entire tragedy. Missy is smart. She's funny. She's arguably more emotionally capable than anyone else in that house. And she spends 7 seasons being treated as an afterthought, because all the family's energy, money, and attention goes to her genius twin brother. Think about what that does to a kid. You grow up next to someone the entire world calls a miracle, and you slowly realize the world has decided you're the normal one, the background one. So in season 6, she rebels, hard. She acts out, she lashes out, she stops caring, and the show frames it as teenage attitude. But listen to why she does it. She's furious that her family treats her like she doesn't exist. That's not a phase. That's a cry for help that nobody in that house has the bandwidth to hear. It nearly costs her everything. Her rebellion arc builds to a genuine near-death scare. And that's the thing that finally gets her noticed. She has to almost die for her family to see her. After it, she tearfully apologizes to her father and promises to do better. Sit with that. The forgotten kid apologizes for the crime of finally being seen. And the gut punch on top of it? Years later, young Sheldon reveals that Missy's adult life is rough enough that her own brother ends up having to keep an eye on her. The girl who was overlooked as a child doesn't magically get an easier adulthood. She just keeps being the one nobody made room for. And then there's the oldest, Georgie. Here's a number that should stop you cold. 17. Georgie was 17 years old when his childhood ended for good. He's a high school dropout working at the laundromat when he meets Mandy. She's 29. He lies and says he's 21. She lies and says she's 25. The whole thing is built on a lie from the first second. Then they sleep together. He finally tells her the truth, that he's 17, still in high school age, and she is horrified. She kicks him out, rightfully. And then, hours of screen time later, she hands him a pregnancy test, then a second one, then a third. So now a teenage boy from a family that can barely afford itself is going to be a father. And watch what the show does here, because it's devastating. George and Mary sit at the dinner table and realise they are watching their own lives happen again. They got pregnant young. They married young. They know exactly how hard the road ahead is, because they lived it. Mary's instinct is to force a wedding to protect her reputation. George's quiet, heartbreaking question is the realest line in the whole arc. You ever stop to think she doesn't want to marry a 17-year-old? Georgie doesn't get a graduation. He doesn't get a wild young adulthood. He gets a baby named Cece, a marriage built on a shaky foundation, and a lifetime of responsibility that lands on him before he's even legally an adult. And the show told us, through Big Bang Law, that this marriage doesn't last. We watch him sprint into a future we already know breaks his heart. Now, here's one that haunts the show in a way newer viewers don't even realise. On the original Big Bang Theory, adult Sheldon told us his father was unfaithful, that George cheated, that the marriage, the warm one we watch in young Sheldon, was not the whole story. So for years, young Sheldon fans watched George Sr. with a knot in their stomach, waiting for the man we'd grown to love to break our hearts. And the show leaned into it. It introduced Brenda Sparks, the attractive neighbour. It gave George a flirtation. After a brutal fight with Mary, George ends up at a bar with Brenda, and that's where he has a heart scare. The implication was right there. The divorce, the betrayal, the broken home. It all felt like it was coming. And then the writers blinked. They quietly walked it back. They made George a faithful, devoted husband and let the cheating storyline fade. Sounds like a mercy, right? Here's the dark part. By making George good, by making him a loving dad who never strayed, they made what happens next so much worse. Because now we're not losing a flawed man who hurt his family. We're losing a genuinely good one. From the very first season, the show was warning us. Season 1, Episode 3. George has his first heart attack. Young Sheldon stands in a hospital, staring at his dad hooked up to machines. The seed is planted that early. It happens again seasons later. Another heart episode after that night with Brenda. The show kept showing us his heart, kept reminding us it was fragile, kept telling us gently, this is how it ends. And then, in the third to last episode, it ended. There's no dramatic music, no deathbed. George Sr. gets up, grabs his travel mug, promises he'll be back for a family photo and says, to a room not really listening, "See you all later." He walks out the kitchen door into the sunlight, and he never comes back. The writers made a deliberate choice. We never see him die. Hours later, two of his closest friends, the principal and the coach, show up at the door, and the family understands before a word is spoken. Heart attack. He's gone. The thing Big Bang promised us a decade earlier finally, quietly arrived. And here is the detail, the one the creators built the entire ending around. As George walked out that door for the last time, said his casual, "See you later," Sheldon never looked up from his book. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't even glance at his father. It was a completely ordinary, forgettable morning. And the show's creator said the whole point was that Sheldon would spend the rest of his life living with that moment. The genius who remembers everything, cursed to remember the one time he didn't look up. That's the tragedy of the Cooper family in a single image. A good man walks into the light, and his brilliant son is too distracted to notice it's the last time. So that's the Cooper family, a mother who lost her God, a daughter who had to nearly die to be seen, a son who lost his childhood at 17, a father who walked out a door one ordinary morning and never came home. It was never just a comedy. It was a story about how much love can exist in a family that the world keeps knocking down, and how the people we lose are usually lost on the most forgettable days of our lives. But here's the question that young Sheldon leaves hanging, and it's a dark one. We know from the Big Bang Theory that adult Sheldon barely talks about this family, that he becomes cold, distant, almost cruel about his upbringing. So what actually happened to the Coopers after George died? Because the version of Sheldon we meet as an adult doesn't sound like a boy who was loved this much. I'll see you in the next video.